I've not posted in a while, sorry about that. And I'm sorry because I said I was going to be talking about the demise of the Seekers, but something else has now piqued my interest, so I just couldn't make a video on it. As well as that revision for my mocks has been really hectic recently, I do hope it's understandable. Anyways, today I'm not sure how to say what I'm talking about, but you know how there's things you have to do to make you explore more of the map in the game and thus make the game more interesting. Well, I'm talking about how Baby in Yellow does this and what I think it means from a storytelling perspective. When we first see this in Baby in Yellow, it's finding the missing music pieces in Alice Pickman's apartment, and then we have to hammer downboards to get the King's Lullaby record. The question we are going to answer today is, why did Alice make her apartment this way? Because it was Alice who put the boards up, Alice who ripped the music sheets up, etc., etc. I will also be delving into why Nicholas locked his house up today, but I'm doing Alice first because she's better. To understand why Alice did this, we need to know what her relationship with the king, and thus the baby, was like. I think in the beginning she didn't even notice she was losing her sanity, but towards the end, that's when she truly realized she didn't want what was going to happen to her and other people. If you want to hear more on that, please check my previous video on who and where Alice Pickman is. Now I can make a lot of points as to why I think Alice grew to hate the king, but for convenience, I'll shorten it to this. I was watching a gameplay of Act 2 before the Dark Whispers update, and I saw the person see these books. Credits to the person who made the gameplay is in the description, continuing with the theory. Even if you disregard my previous theory that Alice is the white rabbit we saw in her apartment, that we can learn things about her via the books in her house. So we can make the assumption it's Alice who's saying, "Help me." This shows how she no longer wants to be tied to the king and wants to be free of this accursed nightmare. Now we have that piece of information out of the way, we can dissect the song, King's Lullaby, and try to understand why Alice wanted to rip away all of the ties towards it. The King's Lullaby is capable of stunning the baby, but I don't think it's overly useful in the long run. In a lot of mythology for old religions, there's a belief that if a god loses its followers, then it will lose power. Since the baby is directly tied to the king, we'll assume it's similar for both of them. Alice was shown to be a devoted follower, going so far to make a shrine for the king. The King's Lullaby is a direct piece of worship to the king. The fact that the baby almost immediately turns into its demon form when the sitter is about to leave shows an immense amount of power that we just did not see in Act 1. And promptly after turning into a demon, the player gets enveloped into Carcosa. A demonstration of power like this was not seen before. Act 2, and it's plausible that the baby locked the door, that we were going to follow the rabbit through on purpose as to gain a greater level of power sense. They knew we would get the King's Lullaby out, so if Alice grew to detest the king, then she'd want to ensure that he has as little power as possible. To do this, she'd need to eradicate every piece of music she made dedicated to him and lock up any possible chance of someone getting to it. This would explain the dire amount of scribbles we see in the shrine and why it's locked away and hidden from people. She wants to spite the king for what he did to her, and the easiest way to do this is to take away his power to the best of her ability. I hope all of that made sense. If not, then I'd say don't worry, but we're about to open an even more confusing can of worms to talk about. I can't believe I haven't spoken about Act 3 before this video. It's probably the most loved part of Baby in Yellow, and it's such a fun time every moment I play it. I'm always enjoying myself. So we are now going to answer the question of why were all the doors in Nicholas's lab locked up. I will be going over some difficult and triggering topics in this part of the video. So if that makes you uncomfortable, then please click off now. Nicholas had lost everyone by the point of Act 3. The only thing he had left was the black cat because he had lost Newt. We can presume the black cat cares about him to a certain degree, as Nicholas says she tries to warn him of danger, which suggests she wants to keep him out of harm's way. Whether that's because he's the only one who can defeat the king now or just out of genuine affection is not confirmed. Although I do think it's probably just because he's the only hope humanity has, as she knew where to find Newt, but she didn't bring him to her despite the fact it would have definitely improved his mental state. I have got a point on the black cat being the one to collect us from the baby's apartment, and I will get back to this. I promise. Nicholas hid away all the keys on purpose. He added a lock to the photography room on purpose. These aren't things you just do on accident. It's not like the cat's going to be going out of her way to hide everything just to make the gameplay more enamoring. No, I think Nicholas was planning on leaving permanently. But that doesn't explain where he would go. And realistically, where could he go? He has nowhere since he probably doesn't even have a birth certificate anymore. As a result, he doesn't have a lot of options. But like I said, he's completely on his own with no one but a cat. He's lonely, delirious, has nowhere to shower, and is losing hope rapidly. So, while what I'm about to speak on isn't very nice, I do believe that's what he was going to do. I think Nicholas was originally planning on ending his life. Remember when I said I was going to talk about the cat bringing us here? I've gotten to that bit of the theory now. The cat being the one to bring us here is important to me. She takes us to Nicholas's home and leads us around the lab before disappearing. Considering the chapter is supposed to revolve around her, we don't see a lot of her, and she's mainly slinking to the sides. The only time we see her in collisions is at the very end when she's walking next to Nicholas. This suggests she was the one to bring him back to the laboratory. She keeps him out of harm, remember? Him planning to end his life would be harmful. Therefore, she has to ensure it doesn't happen. This is why the cat is the main focus of Act 3. She's not there for the most part because she's trying to save Nicholas and further ensure the safety of the world. And she's doing this by getting us to cause a ruckus. Nicholas feels guilty for what happened to Alice, implied by when he says, "Not this time, he won't let the king take another innocent soul who wasn't a part of the jaundice court." So the cat dragged him back to the lab to save the player, and this then prevents him from ending his life because his conscience wouldn't allow him to leave the babysitter alone and vulnerable while the rings have stopped spinning. Okay, this was a very long theory, but I hoped you enjoyed hearing it, and I hoped I sounded coherent. Although I was probably a mess the entire time.